And welcome back. It's now 8 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as promised before the break, we're sitting down with the ambassador of the Republic of Cuba to Belize, Her Excellency Lissette Perez. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me and give me this opportunity. Good morning.
Now, Ambassador, let's just start off talking about the blockade in terms of the historical aspects of it. When did it start and what has it meant to your country?
The blockade, the blockade as a policy of the United States against Cuba started from the very beginning of the Cuban Revolution, after 1959. It means that we will arrive to almost 6 decades with the blockades as a policy. And has been a policy to try to change our system, the political, economical, and social system that Cuba decided to establish after the Cuban Revolution, when we decide by our own to transform the reality of Cuban people. At that time, at the beginning of the revolution, as you can know, the inequality in our Cuba at that time was huge. A lot of poor, a lot of the human development index was very, very poor, very weak. And we decided at that moment to improve the human beings in Cuba, improve the people, improve our social programs, and go ahead with the development of our country. But with a very peculiar system, we decided to move forward in the socialism ideals, what means that we consider that all of us are equals, and we have the right, all of us, to study, to go to universities, to have universal healthcare system, universal education. Okay, we decide this kind of system for our country, and we started to move forward on that. And from this kind of transformation, from this very beginning, we received the reaction of the different U.S. administration against us, also because we decided to be independent, to decide our own political and economical system. That's why this is the beginning of the blockade. But in 60 years had been a development of this policy, and that in 90s was established as a law in the Congress of the United States. There is a law that is very consistent. It means that to remove the blockade, you have to remove the law. Today, any kind of president of the United States could move forward with some executive orders and release some measures. But at the end of the day, the removal of the blockade, it means remove the law that is the basement of this kind of policy regarding Cuba. It's a law, and has been very, very difficult to move forward on that. As you may,
sorry. In 2014, though, there was some change in terms of the Cuban-American relations under President Obama. Is the need for the blockade still relevant today? And how, apart from the law itself, is the relationship between the two parties economically changing over these decades?
You're right. At the end of the Obama administration, the two countries started to talk, and we started to cooperate in different areas because we are neighbors, and our intention is to live in civilized or establish a civilized relation with the United States, as you can imagine. And we have a lot of things to share about different challenge that the world is facing and the region is facing. Of course, in these kind of talkings and in different areas, we move forward in the relation, and or as you say, Obama administration, by executive orders, they release some aspect or facilitate some aspect in the relation, but it doesn't mean that they remove the blockade. But because I said before, the blockade is a law. It means that at that time, for example, some trips from the American visitors started to come. Some visitors from the United States came to Cuba, and then the statistic about that started to be high. But in some points, they have to apply for license to go to Cuba. It means that never they have to justify all the time their trip to Cuba. They never feel free to go to Cuba. It's part of the blockade, because it is, when I say blockade, it's because the relation is not usual. It's completely unfair. It's completely trying to stop any kind of linkage between us, and not only between Cuba and United States, also try to stop relation with others. That what we say the extraterritorial effect of the blockade. When I speak about the extraterritorial effects of the blockade, it means that, for example, some person or some company that is established in another country, it have relation with some company of the United States, of some economical or financial relation with the United States, then they have problem to have trade or any kind of financial relation with Cuba. Imagine a country in the current war to move forward in its development with this kind of blockade for its economy and for its life. Of course, it's very a strong situation for our people that is suffering because of this policy, and that's why the international community is conscious of that, and every year vote against this policy in the General Assembly of the United Nations.
Now, that's one of the key things that I wanted to raise, because during that period where Obama had a softening of the blockade, so to speak, it was the first time that the U.S. also abstained from voting. But we've seen under the new president that they've gone back to a very hard line. What does that mean? And in terms of also the efforts to lobby and win support at the United Nations, how has that changed since Obama to the Trump administration?
In terms of lobby inside the United Nations?
Yeah.
Okay, the support of the international community remains intact. When I say that, you can find expressions not only inside the General Assembly, you find expression everywhere. If you go, for example, last year, in different events, regional events, talking about the meeting of the African Union or meetings of the non-alignment movement, or meetings, regional meetings even here in our region, CARICOM, Cuba, or ACS, talking about a Caribbean state. The environment is all the time against the blockade, because our neighbors and the international community want to enjoy this civilized relation between Cuba and United States. Is something that is very constructive for all of us. And talking about the United Nations itself, last year we received the support of 191 countries in favor of Cuban revolution against the blockade. This year, tomorrow, is the voting, and we will hope to have the same support, because the spirit of the blockade has been tightening. And believe me, Cuba is a country that by our own has been doing a lot in terms of human development, without any kind of credit, any kind of loans, any kind of support. And we are a small island with 11 million of persons to feed, and we have an economy to develop. But with this kind of environment, we need definitely to create conditions to put all of our potential, or to put in place all of our potential to do more. Because in this condition, in 60 years, we did a lot in human development index of our population.
Let me ask a question there, because the U.S. cites as its major reason for the blockade is that Cuba, in fact, in its revolution, removed freedom of choice from its citizens. What's your response to that? That's the main reason, because you're talking about, healthcare, education, so many things as fundamental rights that are guaranteed under the structure of socialism and under Cuba. But the U.S. also says that people don't have a choice, and that's the reason why they maintain the blockade.
The Cuban people have a space everywhere, every space to choice and to express itself. It means that we have a space in our different organizations, very strong trade unions, very strong movement of women, very strong movement of young people, cultural movement. You can find our civil society is huge, it's very huge. You have a space everywhere. Cuban people is very spontaneous, it's very all the time, have a space to express themselves in culture from different perspectives of our society. We enjoy all the year different festival, international festival, and when some person that never visit us all the time, we say, go to Cuba and see how the Cuban express themselves in every kind of a scenario. And because our people is very spontaneous, it means that our choice is there in every kind of a space. And we are very warm people. We receive all the time, and we express what we think to the foreigners and among us. It means that we are a very healthy. We have a very healthy society with a responsibility to move forward, and we enjoying that. We have a space for everything, and for us, is the combination when you enjoy all of kind of rights are indivisible. The humans, the political, the economical, and the social. You don't see that you have freedom if you don't have a health or access to education. For example, the human rights issue is indivisible. Today, the human rights are in all the time. We have this debate in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and the country presents the review every year for what is happening, the improvement that they have in their countries, and we are proud to show there our achievement in every kind of our sectors. For example, now, let me just highlight briefly that we are immersed in the constitutional referendum. We want to go forward to the new constitution next February.
Oh.
And yes, and we are in this process of consultation with all the people in the communities, consultation, communities meeting. Very interesting one, by the way, when all our people are expressing freely about what is the country that they want, what is the vision that we want as a country for the new generation for 10, 15, 20 years ahead. No, we are now immersed of this kind of consultation, what is very interesting one, and we will vote in the referendum for a new constitution, and it's very revolutionary constitution because it improves a lot the right of our people, and a lot of articles are very in synchrony with all the international convention that are already in place at the United Nations system.
No, I mean, it's very interesting that one of the complaints by the superpower in this hemisphere is the lack of choice. When Cuba, as a country, represents the choices that countries have politically, not necessarily only the democratic states like the US, but a more socialist existence. And we have seen where there has been a problem with other states exercising that option of exploring, like Cuba, a form of democracy other than democracy. For example, in Jamaica, when Jamaica tried it, and we saw what the response of the world was. But I wanted to put to you that in every hard situation, as this blockade is, there is a silver lining. There's a positive. And one of the positives must be that Cuba represents the choice and the strength of small nations to determine who they want to be, which is no different from Belize. I have a two-part question, which is one, what lessons do you think that Belize can learn from the way Cuba has handled the blockade and their relations with America? And two, isn't this vote at the UN almost like forcing somebody to be your friend when you have 191 other friends? You probably don't need them. Could you answer those two questions?
Yes, of course. In terms of lessons, we are very humble always about that, because as we don't like that no one interfere in our system. We build our system because we decide this kind of system for our people. We never interfere in any kind of it's a decision of every country how do they feel, because every country have particularities. You never can repeat the same situation from one country to other, because never the situation is never the same. But what I have to tell you is something is good in terms of blockade that is a suffering. Is that Cuban people have to be very creative all the time, trying to do few with or a lot with a few things. We have to organize ourselves in communities, trying to be more efficient in terms of social programs. When we don't have medicine, we have to. That's why we arrived to a huge pharmaceutical industry, because we had to do our own medications, our own human resources. We develop our human resources. We have universities in every single province of Cuba. And we consider that our organization, the society organization, is a key for a lot of achievement that Cuba have. For example, when we face a natural disaster, the organization in communities, the linkage of and the coordination of our institution and the community is a key to avoid any kind of natural disaster, for example. But in others, in health, for face any kind of health emergency or any kind of health epidemic, the organization of the society, again, the creativity of our people is present. But it's hard to say that the blockade have a positive side, because it had been very difficult. I don't think how people can live in today without how Cuba is living without any kind of loans, credits to the developments, or trying to all the time the persecution of our financial operation, our commercial operation. When some Cuban company want to buy an equipment to development of our medical system, the company say, no, I can't sell you that because we have relation with some American companies. It's crazy. To live in this way is crazy. And despite that, Cuba had been reached a lot of achievement, and not also have this achievement, try to help others and cooperate with others, because we strongly believe in the South cooperation, the cooperation among us, among the CARICOM countries, among the people of the South. If we have some human resources in this area, we have to share with others in terms of agriculture or other culture or other sectors. And we try to be solidary, practice the solidarity with others all the time, because this is another side that we try to highlight all the time. And in terms of the message of the international community, yes, it's important. It's important despite this is a law of the United States that they have to remove by themselves. But the message of the international community is strong. The solidarity in the countries is also important to show them that the most of the international community recognize the genocide, that this, because it's a genocide and qualified as genocide in terms of the Convention of the United Nations. The blockade is against international law and against the Vienna Convention, against the system of the United Nations. That's why we have this support. And despite most of the international community say yes in favor of Cuba, for us it's important to continue receiving this message, because it's our battle. It's the battle of my people suffering and wanting to be independent and sovereign, but with the decision to have a development for all, because it's what we want, the development of our country for all of our people, trying to keep the equal system for our people, trying to keep our achievement, trying to develop the economy to then help in the well-being of our persons.
Ambassador, that perhaps is the crux of the matter, in that it's all about how the blockade, though it's not physical, how it actually impacts the economy and the growth potential of Cuba. How do Cubans view that? Because that perhaps is something that we don't have an eye into. Of course, we are impacted more by Western media, so we don't get a view from within Cuba. What's the view, in your opinion, from the Cuban people on the way that the blockade impacts their life?
Cuban people is very informative people, very well, they know a lot. They follow all the time this voting, the support, and it of course help us and increase the self-esteem of us, because had been very because the suffering of the danger of this policy, and they all the time say, okay, we want to remove the blockade. During this day, they express basically this message to the international community, and they know where is the effect of the blockade and where the inefficiency of own inefficiency could be. They have the clear they can recognize where is every kind of is it something related with our own mistake, because it's a new construction of our economy, or because it's the effect of the blockade. But they are for sure clear that the blockade is the most important obstacle that today affect the enjoyment of the human right of the people.
Let me use a backdoor into Kevin's question. Can Cuba develop, or as opposed to looking towards the U.S., can it develop outside of the U.S.? And I think that was his question. Instead of saying, I want you to be my friend, and you have 190 plus countries saying we are open to trading. The question then, I think, is indirectly, unless in a metaphorical way, can Cuba choose a different route to development? Does it have to be linked to the U.S.?
It's what we did in 60 years. It's what we did. Of course, we have to go to find merchandise in another part of the world and pay a lot of costs because of transportations, or because of the distance, or because the cost of financial cost if you have the trade with countries that are far from us. But it's what we have been doing. We have been very creative in that to try to overcome the blockade all the time. 60 years doing this exercise.
And still, I think economically, Cuba is about the 5th largest exporter of U.S. farm products. So how does that backdoor work, even though you talk about the challenges of bringing, especially food, supplies from other places that are much further, that you end up being the 5th largest exporter of, importer of farm products from the U.S.?
Yeah, but they have to be, this kind of operation has been very controlled and have to be authorized with a lot of license and a lot of requirements. And was in the period when we, in the talks, we start with this process, but it doesn't mean that it's a release of the blockade. We can trade freely with them. We can trade freely with any, not only trade, have relation in academic terms, in cultural terms, in financial terms. We don't have free relation with them. Just every kind of single operation should need a license, need an approval, and a long bureaucracy to be authorized on that. And it means that, okay, exists, but in these conditions, and it doesn't mean that it's a release of the blockade at all.
It is a principle of war that in order to win, you must first break the will of your opponent to fight. Surely that is what the blockade is aimed to do, to break the will of the Cuban people, which has lasted with some durability for 60 years.
Right.
Now, would you agree with me that in a certain way, a vote to remove the blockade is a signal of victory for either side of two completely irreconcilable political views, so that if and when we reach to the point where the blockade is removed, it must mean that one side has won. Either the Cuban Revolution of Castro's vision for Cuba as a socialist independent state has won, or there has been significant compromise of that vision of revolution to make it more friendly and compatible as a form of North American democratic reality. So, do you agree with me that a vote in the UN would be some signal of one side winning?
Well, what we want to say in this regard is that we have the opportunity to enjoy the lifting of the blockade. Give us all the potential to live without blockade, and we will see. This is what the the Cubans want. And I think that this is the same message from the international community. They want that we live in civilized world, that we can enjoy civilized relation with the United States, and that we can enjoy the similar potential that other countries and move forward in the free conditions for our developments.
What, if I can, what are the Cuban people willing to give up or surrender in order for the blockade to go away? Because if you are negotiating, you are over there, I'm over here, and we're trying to get to a common position, and our positions are irreconcilable. One side has to give up something, or both sides do. What compromise of the Cuban Revolution does the US want, and what aspects of the revolution are the Cuban people willing to compromise in order to get the blockade removed?
Listen, I don't say that this is you can't compromise anything, because the blockade is unfair policy that they have to remove. This is a policy that has been condemned. This is not a right policy, and we don't have to give nothing for the removal. There are not any compromise or any commitment. The blockade has to be removed. Of course, if the blockade is out, then the civilized relation should start, and we can negotiate different areas of cooperation. That we have a lot of areas, but the blockade is nothing to. In the issue of the blockade, it is the unfair policy that has to be removed. It's a punishment to our Cuban people. There are no negotiations in the case of the removal or not. I have to do something in order that the United States remove the blockade. That's why I think that this is one of the most important messages of the international community. Cuba needs the removal of the blockade. The lifting of the blockade is unfair. It's a genocide against my people. And after the removal of the blockade, we will start the civilized relation. I know that this is a battle of 60 years, and we try to cooperate in the area that we can do. We establish international bilateral relations, but the blockade is still here, and this is an obstacle for everything, for my people and for the relation.
Now, because it has persisted for 60 years, yet we come to this vote on an annual basis, and I guess there's a hope from the Cuban people. And I just want to ask you to articulate what is that hope every year as you go in. It might sound like a stupid question, but just in terms of its articulation, what is the hope for Cuba as you go to this vote that makes it such an important thing and it doesn't become a trick, but rather a treat?
No. This is a support. It's a support of international community, and this is very important for us. It's a message. We believe at the United Nations. We believe in the multilateralism. We believe in this kind of concept for this current war. We don't believe in unilateralism of one country. We believe that all of us have to build a better world for all of us. It means that when this vote and this consensus of the United Nations, this important message of the multilateralism means that the country have the right to say what is fair or not fair in this war, and it is the case of the blockade. As I said before, we strongly believe that this is a good message for the environment against these policies, and this is important. The media will reproduce that, and they will again send this message. And we know that inside the United States, because we have relations with a lot of businessmen, congressmen, parliamentarians, that visited on frequently and are against the blockade. And inside the United States, there are a lot of forces that are in favor of the release of the blockade. Also, it's help them to it's another message to them also to continue in their struggle against the blockade, because there are forces outside but also inside the United States. Believe me, it's important. The voting at the United Nations is important.
Now, I want to take a little detour to move away from the economics of it and to talk about the human connection, because I know a part of the struggle has always been how do you connect families who live on opposite sides of the blockade. Mm-hmm. How important is that connection in terms of, even though there are different views, ideological views, how important is the human connection that the blockade also prevents?
Create obstacles for the families, of course. And this is also an impact for the families. Now, because the setback in the relation with the United States, for example, families has to apply for a visa to visit their family at the United States. In other countries that is not Cuba, they have to go to other embassy in the region to do that. What is crazy. It means that this kind of the strength of this new policy is affecting the families. And let me just let you know that basically the environment among families is not political one, it's economical one, as in other cases. The issue that the media all the time reproduce the Cuba from the political perspective, but this is a normal economical situation between families and that live outside or inside Cuba. But what I want to highlight is that the blockade affects the family, the humans, the people, of course. This is one of the most important effects. It's basically the effect affect the people.
I want to ask a little bit about the softening of the relations that Obama did. Obviously, if nothing else, it created a window of to look in and see what the potential is between the U.S. and Cuba. How has that impacted perhaps now the resolve of the Cuban people to have the blockade lifted, or in an age of social media where it perhaps freed up, access to see what the other side looks like? How do you, what's your take on that?
To tell you the truth, was a short period. Create an expectation for move forward in the cooperation and in a lot of areas, but was a short period when we just start. And then suddenly everything was back. And then we still in the same, we are in the even worst. Because we are, if you read the report that Cuba presents every year to the Secretary General of the United Nations, you can read examples in every single sector of our economy, social programs, in our relation with companies, with banks. This is a huge report with the proof what is about the effect of the blockade in every single aspect of our economy. It's crazy. The report is huge. And then, sorry, because it's the voting is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Most of the international community send answers to the opinions about the blockade to the Secretary General, and it's also a report that is public. And when you say what the international community said, they also put on the table new examples. It means that it's not only our report about the examples that we have every year, the example of all of international community that send answer to the Secretary General of the United Nations telling, look, what is happening in our countries. And just, I want this opportunity to transmit our appreciation to the government of, to your government, the government of Belize, because of the support of the blockade.
I want to just interject 1 second there. Why should Belizeans care about this issue? Because I think very often there's a disconnect. For most people, you know, the historical aspect of, you know, what Fidel Castro stands for is more an ideology, but not necessarily something that many people connect with in terms of what it really means. Why should Belizeans care? What would be your
Probably it's a media responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Actually, if I could, I have a little bit different view. And just to spin the question that William asked in a different way, Belize has seen directly what the relationship has been to Cuba. Cuba has been a friend to Belize pre-independence to get us to independence, to who we are, and has been a constant friend now. We can walk less than 10 minutes here and see the effect of the Cuban government's policy to help its friends in our hospital, in art, and overall as to their relations with us and their support. Just to twist William's question a little, how do we repay that help and that friendship in the vote tomorrow, apart from just getting up and saying, we think you guys should drop this?
Yeah, but this is important.
It is also important.
And I will answer you, but I just want to highlight that the effect of the press release of your prime minister against the blockade is very appreciated for us. The speech of your foreign minister in the United Nations against the blockade is very appreciated for us, because this is a governmental part of this process. From the society perspective, of course, this is a media responsibility. It's also a responsibility of us to bring what is happening, what is the effect of the blockade, and have our own perspective, not only live to the big media, what does it mean, and just a superficial part of that, because they count the history by their own, but we are the protagonists, the main actor in this matter. But I appreciate the media in Belize, because all the time that I know the doors, they are open for me, for the embassy, and I want to thank you for that opportunity to spread a little more. But of course, I understand that this is a complex policy, it's huge policy, it's something that in some terms is very technical one when you speak about trade, the financial aspect, or others. And sometimes it surprises the person what they are doing something with us and they find the obstacle. For example, last year when the effect of Hurricane Irma, remember, like hit Cuba, a lot of persons called us to the embassy to try to send donation to Cuba, but they never could that, because the bank say to Cuba, no, you can send any kind of single peso, not dollar, not single currency, in any kind of currency to Cuba. And then the people say, well, how? This is the blockade. And for example, you want to, there are a small community of Cuban here, a small one, but sometimes they want to send something to their families. It's difficult to them. Or if you want to go there for exploring business, or sometimes the banks say, okay, you go to Cuba? No, I will not provide you funds to be in Cuba. You could check.
My final question.
There is a lot of,
yes, a lot of
believe
answers.
me, a lot of aspect of that.
My final question, why I asked my last question, is Belize shortly has a round of challenges to who we are in the face of the international community. There is a referendum between Belize and Guatemala, and it is getting ripe. We rely a lot on our internationalization of this issue and our friends, of which we count Cuba, I believe, as a friend in that fight on our side, and an uncompromised friend on our side. Is Cuba still in a position to continue to give its unequivocal support to Belize in the same way that we've had votes in the UN in support of Belize? And as you say, tomorrow, we anticipate that the Belizean government will stand shoulder to shoulder with Cuba. When the time comes for Belize, when we are taking our challenges with whatever vote we have next year, is the Cuban people and Cuban government still prepared to stand with us no matter what direction or decision the Belizean people make?
Cuba always had been in solidarity with our region, with CARICOM countries, with all of your challenge. Of course, we always go in the position that we want a peaceful region, and is what we hope. We approve in Cuba, in the context of Latin American and Caribbean Community Summit, Latin American Song of Peace. It means that every single action that we or others and our neighbors do in favor of the peace, we will support that because we support the peace in the region. And this is what I can tell you now, that I know that you are in the spirit of to negotiate and go.
We're about to go to court.
Yeah,
Maybe.
but it means that you are in the process, a very complicated process, but in terms of keep the peace in the region. From your side, it's this environment in the region what today is stressing in different ways, and we hope that you can come with Cuba in terms of this environment, enjoy the peace, enjoy the good relation between countries. We always be promoting that as you do, because it's the same. Because when Belize approach to us, always try to, and the CARICOM countries want that Cuba can enjoy civilized relation with the United States. It's in the same, because the spirit today, every historical moment have its own particularities, and today what we have to preserve is the peace in the region, in different scenarios, in different contexts, and no one can say that my issue is the only one, because we are living in the we have to see in different levels.
But what if, and I know I said it was a frank question, but what if, let's say for example we go to court and we win, and Guatemala says, we're not going to respect that, and they threaten us with something other than peace. Can we count on the Cuban government and people to come to our aid? We wanted peace, they don't want to.
The witness.
Listen, we strongly believe in international law, in the international negotiation, international scenario. I think that this is the battle when we have to go today. This is a scenario. We are going to General Assembly in this matter, because we are strongly believe in the United Nations, and in the case, despite some manipulation that we will suffer in different aspects today, but we strongly believe in international laws and international agencies and bodies that are, because it's what we have, and we have to respect that. This is
Well, Ambassador, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. And of course, we will tune in, and we encourage Belizeans to tune in to what happens at the UN, because it's not just a vote, it's also solidarity and speeches why countries support Cuba in the removal of the blockade. So we definitely want to encourage Belizeans to tune in and get a bit more information on the importance of this. Thank you very much for joining us today.
And thank you for having me again, and thank you for having the passion to help Cuba in this claim.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, it will be to focus on managing copyright in audio-visual productions. Don't go anywhere. Open Your Eyes will continue after these messages.